We'll now call to order the June 23rd, 2025 City of Abilene, Kansas City Commission meeting. Shayla, may we please have a roll call?
Mayor Ryan,
Here.
Commissioner Miller,
Here.
Commissioner Witt,
Present.
Commissioner Kohlhoff,
Here.
Commissioner Meisberg is absent. Roll call is complete.
Okay. Will you please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next up is our approval for today's agenda. And I will make the motion to approve today's agenda with the amendments of removing item 9A and 9B, along with the amendment to add an item per our city attorney.
I would refer to that item as a discussion regarding delegation of city manager purchasing authority.
Adding it as item 8B. Could you repeat that, please?
Discussion and potential action regarding delegation of city manager purchasing authority.
Okay. And just to reiterate that motion to approve the agenda with the addition of item 8B, discussion and potential action regarding the city manager purchasing authority, along with the removal of items 9A and 9B under an executive session with attorney-client privilege.
I'll second that.
Motion has been moved and seconded. Do we have any further commission discussion? I'll give a quick recap on the removal of 9A and 9B. There's still a couple technicalities in the contract to work out with our interim city manager candidate. And we kind of got down to crunch time. I checked right before. We still don't have it. Really don't want to review that in real time during an executive session. And without having that contract to discuss, we aren't legally able to go into executive session to discuss a contract that we haven't received back. We could check on them. There's an ability to do it regarding the contract that we had already sent out. There's maybe a gray area there, but without that response from Mr. Quinday's attorney, I would prefer to hold out until we get that reviewed by City Attorney Martin along with the rest of the commission before going into executive session and discussing that. So, any further commission discussion on that? No. Seeing none, we'll move to roll call vote. Vice Mayor Miller.
Yes.
Commissioner Witt.
Yes.
Commissioner Kohlhoff.
Aye.
Commissioner Meisenberg is absent. Myself, yes. Motion carries. Our next item is the consent agenda, which consists of the regular meeting minutes from June 9th, 2025, along with the special meeting minutes from June 12th, 2025.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as written.
And I'll second that.
Motion has been moved and seconded. Do we have any further commission discussion? Seeing none, would roll call vote. Commissioner Witt.
Yes.
Commissioner Kohlhoff.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Miller.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Motion carries. Our next item under public comments and communications is 6A, public forum. If there's anyone that would like to address the commission on an item not on today's current agenda, they may do so at this time. Do we have anyone that would like to address the commission on an item not on our current agenda? Seeing none, we will move through section 7 under business items. As there are none, we'll move into items for discussion. 8A, discussion regarding rebuilding of T hangars at the Abilene Municipal Airport. Interim Finance Director Briand.
Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Mayor and Commissioners, this is the discussion from last meeting's study session regarding rebuilding the airport hangars, and Brian Coombs is available on Zoom to give us an update.
Brian, the floor is yours.
Okay, Mayor and Commissioners, thank you for having me again. Can everyone hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Great. I think I might see an airport board member in the crowd as well, but yes, following up on our conversation from last week, so I was able to have a meeting with the FAA to solidify the funding scenario. So I have a couple of additional updated funding scenario documents to share. I did reach out to explore that topic if there is potential to pursue additional KDOT funding. And unfortunately, I haven't gotten a response yet from the KDOT Division of Aviation, so I'm still working on that front. But I think it's still helpful to review the updated funding plans that we have, and then further discuss our options. So if you have anything else you'd like me to cover, I'd be happy to. But if not, I'll kind of jump right into sharing my screen with these funding plans.
Think we're good with that?
Okay. So this is an updated version of the 8-place funding plan. This is real similar to what we looked at the last meeting. If y'all can see this, okay. I'll see if I can make it a little larger. So I have updated the available entitlement funds and what we call the IIJA, or more commonly known as the BIL funds, that are available in fiscal year 26. That total is anticipated to be 640,000. The FAA did confirm that under the current FAA reauthorization legislation that was passed last year, that we can plan to encumber entitlement funds out through fiscal year 28 if so desired. So that's what's shown here. In order to use these funds, these would be issued to you as grant amendments. So they would come in summer of 2027 and summer of 2028. So there is, if we wanted to proceed with the project now or in the relatively short term, as is desired, there is a potential, temporary financing gap that would need to be covered for those to come back. So with that scenario in mind, and using our funds that are available through 2028, you can see the projected anticipated out-of-pocket city share after using the insurance money is available is approximately $175,000. So that would construct a 8-place T hangar, which is the, basic option that we've reviewed below, and I believe is the option that the airport board is preferring as well. For comparison purposes, we did also run the cost of a simple standard size 6-place T hangar, which would be this configuration. And we have the same funding plan scenario shown here. So trying to utilize those funds out through fiscal year 28, you could theoretically balance your out-of-pocket share by simply using your available insurance funds. So the resultant out-of-pocket share could be zero using a partial amount of the entitlement funds out through fiscal year 28. In order, again, so that's the difference between a 6-place option and an 8-place option in the location that we're studying there. So then the last item, I guess I'll say, is we are in the process. We've reached out to KDOT to ask if there's possibility to apply for additional years of KDOT grant funds to assist with this scenario. We haven't received a response yet, but that's something that we can continue to pursue. But this scenario assumes that the answer to that question from them would be no, you've gotten the only grant that you'll receive for the project. What questions can I answer at this time?
Any questions for Brian?
What do you anticipate the funding gap would be? Let's say if we were to move forward on an accelerated timeline here as quickly as possible, how much would the city be carrying and for what time period?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a little bit of nuance to that answer too. So if you'll allow me to elaborate a little bit. We've combined your fiscal year 26 pot into one column here, this 640,000. Traditionally, the simplest way is that this 640K, all of this 640K comes available for a grant in spring, May, June of 2026. So therefore, you'd be waiting on 150,000 to be covered summer of June of 27, and then again in June of 28, plus your out-of-pocket share of this amount. So if we moved forward with the project now and we got the grant in June of 26 to encumber this 640,000, there would be the 300K that we're waiting on for future years to get reimbursed, plus this 175K, which is your ultimate out-of-pocket share. So if you looked at it that way, you'd have about $475 to $500,000 sitting out there that wasn't funded by the grant in June of 26, and then you'd get 150,000 of that reimbursed in June of 27, 150,000 of that reimbursed in June. I say June, it could be June to August, depending on the, summer of 27 and summer of 28 is probably a more appropriate term for that. There is an option, what we originally discussed, when we were talking about initiating this project last fall. Theoretically, your IIJA funds, the grant for those can be issued faster than the grant for your entitlement funds. So you can receive the grant for this $260,000. Could receive a grant for that in January, February of 2026. And then we would follow up with a grant for this remaining 300,000 in June, July of 2026. That adds a little more grant paperwork. That's 2 grant processes to go through next spring. So that's a little bit cumbersome. It allows you to access this money a couple months faster if you're trying to move as fast as possible. So the only reason that we would want to do that is if we wanted to bid the project this fall, try and get this money in hand in February, and then this money in hand in June. Another option would be to bid the project early next year in 2026, and then receive all of this 640,000 in one single grant next summer. So it does depend a little bit on if we really want to accelerate it quickly. I think the FAA would allow us to advertise and receive bids October, November of this fall. And then, the city is theoretically having this amount hanging out there for 6 months until a grant can be written in the summer. Now, there are a lead time on a building is probably still a few months. So there's at this point, most likely we're looking at construction starting, spring, summer of 26, either way, whether we bid it before the winter season or after the winter season. So that's a lot of information. I know, maybe a little more detailed than what you were asking for, Commissioner, but that's kind of the full picture of what that cash flow scenario would look like.
Brian, I presume that there may be an increased cost if we did the 2 grant options for administering 2 grant applications.
Per Perhaps we typically roll with that on our end and try to make it work. So it's not something that I would that I could quantify as significant compared to the overall budget. There would be some extra administration in there. It would probably roll into our construction phase services agreement that we would have at that point. But I would say it would be relatively minor.
What is the risk that any of those grant funds wouldn't be available or that wouldn't be received, I guess, if we did apply for them?
It's non-zero. It is theoretical that something could happen. My understanding is it would take Congress modifying the FAA reauthorization that was passed in 2024 to eliminate those funds. So there is a potential scenario where these future funds get modified out of legislation. I've never seen that happen. I don't know that anybody on our team has seen that happen. That 150,000 per year has been steady for over a couple decades now, and I would be very shocked if circumstances arose that led to that being cut. Again, it would take a separate act of Congress to modify, I think, the FAA reauthorization that's been already passed. So there is a possible scenario where that would get rescinded, but it's very, very low, and we've never witnessed it during our career.
Is that FAA reauthorization through fiscal year 2028?
Yeah, it was a 5-year package passed in FY24 last year. So that's why they're telling us we can plan for it. Our FAA planner told us we can plan for it being received through FY28, but we can't plan any further out than that. That's the guidance that they're telling everyone right now.
Where do you think the timeline is where we minimize our risk most effectively for that, whether it's the multiple smaller grants or the one large $640,000 grant?
I think from a planning and simplification standpoint, waiting to bid next spring simplifies capturing the 640,000 all in one shot next spring. The risk associated with that scenario is if conditions change in the market and steel building prices go up, there could be some inflation that's realized between the opportunity of bidding it this fall versus waiting to bid it in, say, March or April of 26. So from your funding receipt standpoint, it is simpler to wait until the spring and bid it and get this 640K in hand and then receive 150,000 in the 2 subsequent years. No crystal ball inflation from our construction standpoint. It's still there. It's not as volatile. It doesn't appear to be as volatile as it was 2 years ago. But there still is some, we're still seeing inflation through projects the longer we wait to execute them.
Is that mic on?
Jim Price with the Airport Board. Brian, we've kicked the can down the road quite a bit here. I know that due to some communication problem, this commission did not get our desires in April when we did it at our meeting. I'll take credit for that, I guess. I should have addressed the committee at the time. But my question is, have we used $150,000 for 25 and 24? Because I don't remember ever spending that kind of money.
This FY24 funds is getting used in your current obstruction removal and displaced threshold project, but we're anticipating this amount of recovery coming back towards that grant. but checking with our FAA planner, these are the amount of funds of your entitlement that are available through FY 26. And then these are the remaining BIL funds that are available.
Still seems like we're 300,000 short, but I can't write a check for that today. The idea of advertising the bid right away, how soon could you have that available if they were to select this offer today?
Yeah, when we had talked about, when we originally initiated the project last fall, the goal was to have it ready to advertise by approximately September of this calendar year, so that we would have the option available to bid it this fall if we chose to do that with the cash flow situation. So that's the path that we're on. If we get clear direction on the configuration of the building, we can certainly we'll be in great position to be ready to advertise this fall. And typically the consideration that most airport projects have is that you don't want to advertise too early in front of when you can get when you can receive your grant, because you run the risk of having your bid hold period expire before you get your FAA grant funds in. In this case, when we were talking about that initially, it was known that with the KDOT grant and with the insurance money, hopefully there's enough funds to go ahead and bid and award the project while we are waiting for those FAA grants to come in.
In other words, is there any way we can get ahead of this time capsule here by perhaps doing the concrete work as soon as possible and covering it with the funds from insurance and et cetera?
If we were open to a scenario where we bid the project and awarded it before receiving any FAA grant funds, and we would negative check to the FAA if they were available to that, perhaps that's a path that we could look at going down, would be to accelerate it and try to bid it. If we can get it, like I say, if we can get the FAA to concur, we could evaluate an option to bid it earlier than September, later this summer, and give someone a chance to potentially start that foundation work this fall. If that happened, then the city would need to cash flow essentially all three of these line items and waiting for the multiple grants to come through at a later date. This pot would come through, or I'm sorry, this pot could potentially come through in January, February of 26. This amount here could come through in June, July of 26, which would make up the 640K, and then we'd be back on the original schedule.
I'm just trying to figure out a way to compress this a little bit. I was hoping to see the hangar in my lifetime, but it might not happen.
I understand, and and our FAA planner, expressed some sympathy for that, knowing that the hangar's been a need, but that it's kind of the FAA requirement to work on the obstruction removal and the displaced threshold and get that cleaned up before allowing the hangar to proceed. So there was some recognition of that from the FAA's end as well.
Well, just as the chair of the airport committee, I think we've done our due diligence. We've hunted and searched and et cetera. We have at our committee meeting said, this is what we want. Unfortunately, I don't think that word got back to the proper people. So today I'll tell you, this is what the airport board recommends. The financing of it, I have a hard time with my monthly bill. So we'll let you folks figure that out. But thank you, Brian.
Jim, while you're there, if you don't mind hanging out at the podium there for another minute or two, just so I'm clear, it's my understanding that you do want to go forward with the 8 hangar plan.
Yes.
And it looks like the out-of-pocket share is about 175,000, and there would be some looks like additional carried interest, kind of depending on the timing for the 27 and 28 funds. Um, is it feasible that the income from the rental of those hangars could service that debt? Because I don't know.
And in the short term, no.
Well, I think you
But if we
mentioned,
don't have the hangars, we don't have any income coming in.
yeah, I mean, I think that some of the heartburn for at least me on this side of the table is, um, I don't have any appetite to hold $1 million in funds
Yeah.
for people who own airplanes, to be
Yeah.
quite frank. And so I think that being mindful of that, I think that the airport board is going to have to find a way, what I would like anyway, I guess my colleagues can speak for themselves. But if you're looking for $174,000 in funds, I think there's some mechanisms that we can use, but it needs to come from the rental of those hangars or from other activities out at the airport. And I don't know, what rental income has been used for historically or what income you have out there. But I think that's something that
I won't tell you where I think it's been going, but I haven't been writing those checks, but it doesn't seem to stay in the airport funds. That's just like the agricultural rent that comes in off the property out there every year.
Mm.
I'm not sure where that goes either.
Well, you're in the right place to ask those questions. But I guess if you wouldn't mind, and again, I'm kind of looking at my colleagues here, is that a reasonable approach if we're going to spend $175,000 on the airport, that we try to figure out how we can get those hangars to pay for that or service that debt?
Over several years, I'm sure we could, yes.
Yeah, and I think,
Yeah.
you know, we're probably looking at a 15-year or some type
Oh,
of,
it wouldn't be that long.
okay. Well, I think we've got a number of different options available to us, but
I had that guesstimated out here. I think I got the wrong sheet of paper though.
Yeah.
I don't think that we know. And I guess that's kind of another concern I have with bidding this in the fall, if we're not going to get the money until mid-year of 2026, is, you know, even if we don't like the number, at least it's a real number and we know we've got
Yeah.
the $1 million coming in from the Fed to help pay for it. It's not going to be thrown back on our shoulders as taxpayers. And I know that's not what you want to hear. And I just think if we're being fiscally responsible here, we need to make sure that those funds are guaranteed before we commit to anything. Or and Brian, you mentioned a bid period, or once that bid goes out, there's a kind of a deadline on that. Can you explain that to us as well?
Yes, so it's pretty common on a FAA funded project that we include a 90-day bid hold period as part of the bid documents. So when a contractor submits their bid, they also submit a 5% bid bond, which is essentially a surety that they, I'm sure you're all familiar with bid bonds, but that they will honor that bid price through the duration of the process. So the 90-day bid hold requires that contractor to honor that bid price for a period of 90 days after they submit the bid up into which a contract is awarded. So then obviously once a contract's awarded and a contract's signed, they're locked into that bid price, but they're not allowed to submit a bid and then a week later pull it back off the table, waiting for you to deliberate and award it. So there's a 90-day period there where they have to honor that bid price, waiting for you to get concurrence from the FAA, receive your grant funds, and then award the contract within that 90-day window. So what I was alluding to, on a typical year on an FAA funded project, we work with our FAA project manager and they tell us to advertise bids in February or March. And then we open the bids in, let's say, April. And then that gives the FAA a 90-day period to evaluate the bid recommendation, write the grant for you to accept the grant, and then you send the contract to the contractor. So all that activity happens within a 90-day period after the bids are opened. So what we'd be talking about is if we wanted to accelerate the project, we would be bidding it theoretically and awarding a contract and then waiting for the FAA at some later date to write a grant, which would then, reimburse some of your capital outlay to that point. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I mean, I guess like it's kind of brash, isn't it, to say, hey, we're going to spend $1 million in FAA, you're going to pay us back later. Here's the grant paperwork. As maybe that's not how it works, but it seems maybe a little presumptuous.
So it's pretty typical for an FAA project. So it is a little different. Most people, when they hear the context of a word grant, for instance, like a KDOT grant, you apply for the grant and then you don't start any activity until you have that grant is awarded and in-house. In the FAA world, since this money is like pre-programmed to come to you, it's scheduled to come to you. The grant is more of like the contract that the FAA uses to deliver you the funds. So it's a little bit backwards and a little bit normal, but every FAA project happens to where the FAA sends you a letter and says, this project's on your CIP, proceed, receive bids, and then the FAA chooses to write the grant amount, or in this case, I'll use the word contract, for the exact amount of the bid. The FAA doesn't send you a grant based on an estimate like most other agencies do. They want you to get hard costs, known bid, known engineering contracts, et cetera, and then they write the grant for that specific amount. So that's kind of the difference in how that scenario plays out. So we wouldn't be going down that path without getting the FAA's concurrence to award the bid. The FAA would say, you have our concurrence to award the bid, the funding will be available when they're in that grant writing window.
One more question. In past years, we've given our 150,000 to several airports in the state of Kansas. Is there any way to find out where that went and see if we can get part of it back?
There potentially would be a way to find out where that went, but it gets used, so it's not sitting out there unused to where you could get it back. And it's not really a scenario where you can call your neighbor airport and ask them to send it to you. The way that happens is the FAA issues transfers, kind of like discretionary funds, to cover the gap on projects where an airport's a sponsor's regular 150,000 per year doesn't cover it. So the challenge is with what they call revenue generating projects, which are hangars and fuel. They don't typically make those a priority to send sponsors extra funds beyond what you're scheduled to receive. So I'm not going to say it's impossible. I know this is a special circumstance with the existing hangar being destroyed. But at this point in time, it's unlikely, and we won't get a commitment from the FAA that they would be giving us transfers to do that.
Is there a timeline on those? Like if, is that on a federal fiscal year? So like October timeline where that would be more, there'd be more possibility that we would have access to something like that?
So the way that process works, the federal fiscal year starts October 1, ends, September 30. So back to our previous conversation, that's why the FAA asks everybody to advertise their bid around the state at the same time, roughly April, and open them. So once all the sponsors, airports throughout the state, open their bids for the projects that year in April, FAA sees who's over budget, who might be under budget, et cetera, and then they'll look at what sponsors within the state maybe not using their 150,000 for that year that's going to expire. So that period between April, May, and then September 30th, when the funds actually would expire and go back to headquarters, that's when that process happens. So typically in May, June, July, of when the FAA is evaluating what transfers are available and what they may or may not be able to shift. It depends on a lot of different factors. What are the high priority projects in the state? How do the bids come in on all those projects, et cetera? So you can't really, if you have a low priority project from a standpoint that this is a revenue generating item and they're not going to commit those to us ahead of time, you're kind of waiting for that post bid window in the spring, summer, for that exercise to happen.
And I think you told us this in the last meeting, but maybe you could remind me here. Is there any part of this project that is considered non-revenue generating that might qualify?
Unfortunately, no, because your taxiways are already constructed. This pavement and this pavement, which is considered the public street portion of the project, for lack of a better term, that's the public pavement that all aircraft can use. So they consider the approach pavement, this pavement in this orange color, they consider that part of the building, which is part of the revenue generating project.
Commissioner Wood, I think you had at least you were looking to speak
Yeah.
earlier.
Yep, kind of some building off of Commissioner Koloff's questions. One is, I'm in agreement that for the 8th place with this projected 175 out of pocket, that would be serviced by those hangar rents. What I'm curious about is an expectation on what those would bring in. So I guess looking at some of the airport board members, what's your expectation on what these hangars would bring in each in terms of per month rent?
Hey, the 8 units, if we're keeping them full, I'll get $90,000 a year.
Okay.
Hey, what?
I've seen those numbers somewhere. I'm sure we can look that up if that's,
So.
yeah, I believe that's all goes to the general fund. Just totally off the cuff here. And I think that's probably appropriate. I think you can look at it, it's all city money, right? I mean, it's the airport is on city property. I mean, the airport is coming to us, asking us to help fund the thing. So nobody's self-sufficient. I think that it might, if you don't mind, if you want to speak, it'd
Yeah.
be helpful to come to the podium here.
If we're gonna have a back and forth, we need.
The YouTube people can't hear you.
Yep.
So I think that's important for them to understand what's being asked. I think your question is valid, but I think one of the questions is not how we're going to pay for it. It might be if we're going to pay for it and when we're going to pay for it.
Kelsey, is that something that you could look into between now and the next meeting to?
Yes, I don't have that number
number.
right now, but it's
Yeah.
definitely something I could get.
I didn't expect you to right now, but
One of my second questions, and this acknowledging that since this project intersects the FAA, that always is a huge consideration to things, but knowing that the costs right now are just purely estimates, wondering if it made sense and what the cost would be to design both options and to bid them out both, so that then we could, if this cost estimate for the 8th place comes in lower than expected, then that becomes a no-brainer. But if it's a lot higher than expected and there's uncertainty about how that debt would be serviced, then the 6th place may start to make more sense. But acknowledging designing out too, there's a cost to that, and then maybe there's additional complexity I'm not aware of when it comes to dealing with the FAA with that. So wanted to ask Brian about that.
It's certainly something we would want to run by the FAA. I actually took that same approach for a recent project in Trenton, Missouri, Northwest Missouri. We did bid multiple options, and then for all the same logic that you just laid out. So I do think it would be feasible. And I would check with our team if there is additional costs that we would incur to produce two layouts. It's most likely fairly small, compared to our overall design agreement. I don't think it would be a lot of extra costs. We would work to keep that pretty low, but that is certainly an option. I would think we would want to get concurrence with the FAA, but I was kind of anticipating that might be where you may want to go as well. But yes, we could bid a base bid as the 6-place hangar. That is an option, and then an alternate bid as the 8-place hangar. The way that we did it on that Trenton project is we didn't set it up as an additive alternate, meaning an additive alternate is you've got the base price and then you have the delta to bid the alternate. We actually just bid 2 separate schedules. So we had, here's the cost to construct the 6-place, and here's the cost to construct the 8-place. So we felt that simplified it, and it worked well in that scenario.
Mr. Curtis, maybe you can help me understand here. Are you expecting the rents from just this T hangar to cover any type of debt service on this, or would you be using funds from other hangars or other income to cover that as well? Yes, sir. I'm trying to do the math here roughly. You said about $90,000 per year. Can you?
Yeah. Hey, Jim, can you speak into the mic? Sorry.
Okay, come up and help, will you? Just off the top of my mind, we have 8 units at $100 per unit. That's $8,000, isn't it?
That's 800.
Huh?
That's $800.
800. Okay, I'm sorry. I think misfigured that then. About 12 times, so it's only $9,000 a year there. I got my decimal in the wrong spot, didn't I?
Yeah.
That's a hell of a deal for a math major too. but-
Well, I was coming up with about $1,000 a
Yeah,
month, so I
that's a
think,
lot of money.
yeah.
I'll buy another lottery ticket, so that might help.
What, I did pull up here. I don't have the mowing contract, but I did pull up a record of the other contracts at the airport. It looks like there's hangar rental 3, 19, 21, hangar rental 2. There's some navigation easements, aerial applicator agreements, ground leases. It looks like the Parachute Club has an agreement, hangar rentals for 1, 30, 36, 20. Again, we don't need to do this here in this meeting, but I guess it'd be interesting. I would want to know, can they service that $175,000 in debt from the income, either from this 8-place hangar or from that in combination with some of the other income that they've got, if it's not already allocated elsewhere.
Well, I thought that when the hangar blew down, we were getting $100 per unit.
Month?
Month.
Is that a month?
A month.
If it's helpful, I pulled up the fee resolution, those rates for hangar rental are established in the annual fee resolution, and they could be updated at any time with the subsequent resolution. But the last version of the fee resolution adopted in 2024 provides for hangar rental at the rate of $90 per month.
That's, I would say, not inconsistent with some of the things I found when I was looking for other cities in the state. But I will say that's probably the least expensive per square foot rental rate in the
When I
city.
was looking it up, it was probably 150 or somewhere around there would be,
Yeah.
seems like the market rate right now for comparable cities.
Well, and again, I think if you look at a storage unit for a 10 by 20 that can't hold an airplane, you're probably looking at $100 a month. And so it might it might make sense to have price leadership on that and I mean, put it at a point where it can satisfy the debt if that's what we need to
You're gonna
build
be
it.
down to square footage cost here in a minute, aren't you?
Well, I'm trying not to get there, but really what I'm looking at is that $175,000 and how do we pay for it?
Well, it could probably go up by the same token. If it goes up too much, then you'll price everybody out of using it anyhow, so. Is,
I've looked at the price of airplanes. I mean, if 100 or 200 bucks is going to keep people out of a hangar, then my guess is you probably got some ground storage for them that you could rent to them.
if they care much for the airplane, they want to get them undercover, that's for sure.
I would tend to agree. And I think,
Yeah.
like I said, there's people paying $200 a month to store knickknacks that they don't even want. So I would think if they've got a $100,000 aircraft, they'd want it in a hangar.
So with that, yeah, just come up to the podium. Just state your name, please.
I'm Steve Cabot, live at 313 Northeast Fourth, and I'm on the board. First of all, I appreciate you guys listening to all this. One of the reasons the hangars need to be built right away, in my opinion, is to entice people to come to the airport, put their planes there. The other reason is, I might ask Brian, that if we don't have enough airplanes on the field, what we're supposed to have, we're not eligible for federal grants in the future. I think we're supposed to have 9 now. And they check that about once a year. So if we don't have no hangars, we don't have no people putting their planes there. And that's the only comment. Is that true, Brian, about if you don't have a certain amount of airplanes on the field, that you're not
Yes.
eligible for federal grants?
Yep, that is true. So you are in an acronym that they call the NIPIAS, National Primary Integrated Airport System. So that is why you are eligible to receive this 150,000 per year of entitlement through the FAA legislation. So they call that the based aircraft requirement, and it fluctuates between 9 and 10. We typically advise people to aim for at least 10. And so what that is aircraft owners claim an airport as the based airport for that aircraft. And so you need to have at least 9, if not 10, based aircraft at your field to continue receiving this 150,000 per year. That gets updated every 2 years. So if you fall below that threshold and you were down to 6 based aircraft, until you could get back up to 10 and get recertified on that 2-year period, you would not receive this 150,000 per year. So yes, in situations where a hangar is needed to maintain the based aircraft, it does change the funding justification in some communities from just purely paying for itself because of that opportunity cost of what you may be losing on an annual basis. So I think the FAA is understanding where we are, but I would say that is a scenario to, move forward this year as opposed to waiting for FY 27 and 28 for certain.
Well, I know our airport has been used by several business. Kubota tractor people come in with their jet. Love's come in with their jet. K-State does numerous touch and go landings at the Abilene airport. And we want to make it, it's a public airport, but, other people use it, so that's all I got. Thank you.
Brian, how many airplanes do we have stationed there now?
That is a good question, and I don't have that. I apologize. I don't have that off the top of my head. You're probably not too far above that that threshold. So if this scenario where you didn't have the hangar were to persist for long, you may be in danger of falling below that. But that's been I think the FAA is aware of that, and that's why we've been trying to move this project forward. And again, that's I think why our FAA planner had that sympathy that I relayed earlier in the meeting of knowing that they were requiring that obstruction and removal and displaced threshold project to get done before this could get completed.
Is there any possibility that we could receive funds from other airports that could be applied to that project that would free up other funds within our budget?
Uh, not at this point in the game. If there was the period for that, passed when that project was bid and awarded. So this is what we have here is what's remaining after those projects are done, the 640K. So at this point, your only additional supplementation would be happening, looking forward after we receive bids.
Looking to the rest of the commission, what do you guys think of the idea of seeing what the cost is to design and then bid out both options?
I'm agreeable to that. The other option is the 6. It's not ideal, but the 6th place, I mean, the out-of-pocket share is 0. I don't know, Brian, if it's possible to use the insurance money to cover the 6th place T hanger and then FFA to cover the additional part that we need to be able to qualify for the additional FFA grants, if that makes sense.
I think I've tried to capture that in the 2 scenarios already that you're looking at. Since that we're not using all of your FY28 funds in the 6th place scenario, so there's a little bit of buffer here too, where more FY28 funds could be pulled in the event that the bids come in higher than anticipated. But then in the 8th place, this is essentially maxing out the FAA and KDOT funds that we have available through FY28.
So both of those out-of-pocket shares are reflecting that insurance settlement money being credited.
Right.
Yep.
But the 6th hanger is, what is it? It's 0, right?
Essentially, yes. So once you satisfy all of your available funding streams, your local share is
Well,
this amount, which is offset by the insurance money. So I didn't try to, make this match up exactly, more so for illustration purposes, that your insurance settlement should offset all local share required for the 6th place option. In the 8th place option, if you use all of your insurance settlement, there's still a need of approximately 175,000 of local funds in addition to that.
But to Commissioner Witt's point, we may get to the actual design of that 8th place T hanger and it comes in below. And I know there's some notes on there too, that KDOT funds may be 90% for design, but we'll assume 50%. So that number could come in lower, correct?
Um,
I mean, I guess in general, it obviously could come in lower depending on what the actual hard bid is.
Yes, at this point, I would say that since we're in a situation where our need is in excess of the available funds, in the 8th place scenario, if this percentage changed to 90, then it would just increase the local share required, if that makes sense. So I think to answer your question, the only way that this would go down is if the bids came in lower than the estimate. Correct. So, or if KDOT came and told us they would give us more, or that we would have the opportunity to apply for more than the 233,000, The KDOT grant cycle applications are due in January, and this past year they publicly announced the grant recipients in May. So that actually just happened a little over a couple months ago, end of April, early May.
Brian, I'm not clear on that. So on your first line, the engineering design and bidding, you've got 122,000. You're saying even if they do pay 90%, we're still going to be responsible for the delta?
So let's say that KDOT paid 90%
Uh-huh.
of this.
Yep.
You'd take this money from here and basically shift it up to this line to cover 90%, which would zero out your funds here. So that would leave this as a full local share because there's not enough KDOT funds available to there's a funding shortfall. So unless KDOT were to increase the total amount of funds that they're pledging in conjunction with allowing the higher reimbursement rate, then at the end of the day, your local share is still this amount because we need more than what they've pledged. If they allowed it to happen at 90, you could just draw it down quicker, but then that would leave you with a bigger, shortfall at the end. That was not part of the funding split.
Yeah, I don't understand that. So I'm clear.
So the total project cost is almost, we'll say 1.6 million for round numbers. KDOT has said you're going to receive 233,000 hard cap. You're not getting any more than 233,000.
I'm with you now.
Here's the FAA funds that are available. Those are hard capped. We still are 410,000 short. So even if KDOT said we can apply these funds at a 90-10 ratio, at the end of the day, we're still going to be $410,000 short.
I'm with you. Thank you.
We could just spend the KDOT funds faster because they'd be happening at a 90-10 split until we expended the full 233. Then there would be no more.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I know that's confusing. So and for the record, I did reach out to KDOT to have that conversation too as part of the, ask for if there's potential for additional funds.
Is that something you foresee that you would have a response on in 2 weeks?
Hope so. There's a chance that the response might be you can apply again in January, but we don't know if you're going to get it or not. So
Right.
I would kind of be surprised if they told us it's a surefire thing, before they went through their 2026 grant cycle. Maybe that would happen, but honestly, I'm not anticipating that. So I think in my mind, the best case scenario, they could tell us, no, you're not getting anything, then it's known. If they don't say no, then I expect what they would say is maybe apply in January and we'll see based on other applications. So I would kind of be very surprised if they answered, yes, we'll give you more funds. It's a guarantee. You just have to apply.
Okay. I guess is everyone in agreement to bid out the 6 and 8 to get hard numbers on each one, that way we fully know what we're dealing with when we move forward?
Yeah, if it's a minimal increase in cost to do that, then I think it makes sense.
I'm agreeable.
I guess I'm open to it, but I'm just kind of running rough numbers here on my calculator here. Assuming there's some interest on that 170, or I guess it's really $300,000. Just for the short-term carry, I assumed about $25,000 above that. Obviously, this is all kind of figured into the calculation, but at 6% on a 20-year note, it's about $1,400, which I feel like the 8 place should be able to cover. It might be more than they're wanting to pay or more than they're used to paying, but I think it's still probably the best deal in storage in the county or the state. So from that perspective, if we can figure out a way to get it paid for, I don't see why we would look at the sixth place, but that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, if we don't think it can pay for it, then
Yeah, my thing is just the uncertainty of where those costs are going to come in. It just seems like a deeply uncertain time for steel prices and stuff like that, of how that's going to play out over the next 6 to 9 months. So
Yeah, because that 175 out of pocket could, when we get the hard bids, it could easily double.
I guess my concern is that if you put two projects like that in front of a contractor, they're gonna inflate both of them, not knowing what they're gonna do. I don't know if that's real or not, but
well, they're still competing with other people. So
yeah. Brian, how many bidders have you had for projects like this?
Oh, it's been limited. I feel like maybe the contracting community is getting a little hungrier than what we've seen the past 2 to 3 years. I don't know how long that will persist, but it feels like there was some more competitive interest this past bidding cycle than we had maybe the previous 2 years. But if we receive 2 to 3 bids on a project of this nature in your location, I would say that's probably normal of what we're shooting for. It tends to, it's not a complicated project, but when the market workload is high, it tends to deter some people that don't want to deal with the Buy American requirement, federal prevailing wage, and some of these other things that come along with accepting a federal construction contract.
Brian, this one is, I'm sorry, I had this question earlier and I buried it. What would be the incremental cost? So say we built 6 today and then decided we want to build 2 in 5 years. What kind of an additional cost are we looking at?
That's a good question. It's hard to say. If you allow me to make a rough guess for you. So the straight up construction cost difference, 8 place, let's say, is 1.35. Pull up a calculator here. So let's say today the delta between the two is $250,000. If you were to have somebody on a federally funded project come back and add 2 bays at a later time, you're going to repay mobilization, which maybe isn't, 120,000, but you would pay for a mobilization again in the future. You'd pay for disturbance of land, somebody maybe doing a concrete mix design. So there's a lot of, you'd pay for that overhead cost again. It would be a duplication that you'd pay in the future. Plus there'd be some rework to the existing building that would happen, and you'd have that period of potentially inflation as well. So right now, if the delta is 250, if you were to go and do it as a standalone project using federal funds in the future, it could be much higher than 250. It's hard to say exactly because that's a small effort. If you had a non-federally funded project and you were just putting out more of a traditional local bid, then that delta to add on 2 bays in the future is probably much less. Does that answer your question? I know that's maybe not the best answer, but it's hard to, it's certainly the cheapest to do those 2 bays is right now. I can probably say that with certainty.
Yeah, and I guess in your scenario, obviously those are offset. Would you just add those additional 2 into that same structure?
Yes.
And that's the way that would be done. Okay.
Yeah, the contractor would be bidding constructing all of this at one time.
I guess what I'm saying is if you started with 6 and then you wanted to add 2, you would essentially just remove the storage from the end of the 6 and add the 2 on and push that storage down. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
they would take the sheeting off of this and maybe remove some columns, so there would be some structural work as well. You'd have to extend the foundation and floor slab, pave a little bit of approach on each side, resheet, etc. So there would be maybe a little bit of column removal and then extending that foundation. But we could design the building to where the foundation could be expandable in the future to add 2 bays. That's what we would do. If we did a 6 and 8 place option, we would design the 6 place to where as it would minimize the amount of rework to the level possible for a future addition of 2 more bays.
Yeah, I think
That makes sense.
I think my thought process on it is I'm not opposed to doing the multi-bid on the 6 and 8. Just so that way we have hard numbers and we know my full intention is to do the 8 unless something drastic changes. But by doing them both at once, if it does come in drastically higher and we just simply don't think it can service that debt, that would still allow us to stay on the same timeline because we've already got that 6-unit bid completed. That's kind of my thought process on it.
Brian, when we look at future year allocations, obviously we're only guaranteed and maybe not entirely guaranteed, but likely to get that $150,000 a year through 2028. If we were to do let's say a lease purchase agreement, like we've done with some other facilities throughout the city, could we allocate some of those future years to pay down that debt?
Can you,
Assuming we'd get a
I'm not
fiscal year 29
familiar with
allocation.
I'm maybe not familiar with a lease purchase agreement.
Essentially the bank would own it. We would lease it back from the bank until the debt was paid off. At least on there's some squishy stuff on this. The school district did this with our football field project, I believe. But could we allocate fiscal year 29 and 30 funds to pay down that 174 and any interest that would accrue on that amount from the 27 and 28 while we were waiting for that to hit the bank? And that's, making some assumptions that that's not already allocated somewhere.
That's a pretty complex scenario. I'm not sure. I apologize. I'm maybe not as familiar with how like that commercial ownership structure would happen. Are you saying that a different entity would own the hangar and you'd be leasing it to own back from them?
I think potentially you could just do it as a loan. I mean, for practical purposes, it would just be a loan from the bank. Does that make sense? I think there's potentially some more complicated structures you could get involved in, but it could be as simple as a loan.
A loan covering these 2 years plus this out of pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're asking, could we use the fiscal year 29 funds to knock that principal out?
Yeah, 29 or 29 and 30 if needed.
Maybe, unfortunately, the FAA, the guidance that they've given us is they can't advise anyone to plan past FY 28. So it is a hypothetical possibility that perhaps you could use that. My own advice as your engineer would be that we may be needing to start planning for some other maintenance on our pavement on the field by that point, 29, 30. So extending that timeline that far might cause us to have to defer some other maintenance that we need at that point as well. But it would be difficult for me to tell you that with confidence that we can pull in any funds beyond FY 28 at this point.
I guess the reason I like that recommendation of the 6 and 8 bidding is simply due to the fact that we'd be able to stay on the same timeline even if the costs were exorbitant. So it still allows us to build them under the same timeline because we've already got that bid received. Like I said, my preference is still building an 8. I think it makes the most sense with maximizing the dollars from the FAA and that KDOT grant, and the saving on mobilization expenses. But at least it gives us something in our back pocket if it did come up and we couldn't service that debt effectively. It would give us an option to at least get something built.
Yep, I agree.
And like City Attorney Martin said, we could adjust that fee schedule too to reflect what would service that debt. Make sure it's within, the market rate, but we can adjust that to match. Are you all good on that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Kelsey, do you have any clarifying questions that you need guidance from us on in the meantime? Okay. Any further discussion on that item?
May I ask just one more opinion, if there's any preference at this point in time to attempt to bid earlier this fall versus spring? And we can revisit this later if needed, but I'm maybe more so a little out of curiosity what the opinions might be right now.
It doesn't seem likely that we'll be ready to build before maybe this time next year. And so the fall bidding might be premature. Like that's my gut feeling. I don't know if that's reality. I think Mr. Price had a good idea there. Potentially, if we have cash to pay for some foundation work, maybe that makes sense to do. I don't know if that's a separate bidding process or if that just, I don't know, maybe forces a second mobilization as well if we're not doing that all at once. I guess my gut tells me we probably need to wait until next year. And again, I'm open to suggestions.
My overall thought is I understand the desire to get it done as soon as possible, but also sticking with the typical FAA timelines seems to make sense just because they're always adding additional complexity to things. So sticking with what they would typically expect is where my preference is.
Before you make a motion, if that's what you're gonna do, you gotta stop and look at this, a 6-unit versus an 8-unit. If you divide that out, the 6-unit costs about $15,000 per hangar more
Mhm.
than the 8-unit does. That work out, Brian? But either way, you gotta close both ends up. You've gotta pour concrete, et cetera. So, and if you've done some construction work, I'd rather build a new house than to add two. It's just so much easier.
Yeah.
But I've got away from that too, so, but I would sure highly recommend the 8-unit.
Mr. Price, while you're on the microphone there. Mr. Price. Jim, are there utilities in those hangars and are those paid for by the individual rentals?
Utility.
Yeah, is there heat, electric, I mean,
Like water and all that stuff, just electricity is all that's in there.
is that paid for by the tenants?
It was yeah, in the existing hangar, it was the 1 unit and it was paid for by the city. Is that right? The electricity in the hangar was paid for by the city. Yeah. Yeah.
Brian, is that, I guess I've seen all sorts of different hangars, including heated, cooled, and so forth.
Well, no, the only electricity that was in it was, well, lights for safety. You might have a plug-in so that you could run a vacuum and clean things. Or if you got an electric heater in the wintertime, you might plug your airplane in. Other than that, the doors are electrically operated. So there's got to be, I think at 210, isn't it, Jim? What they recommend? Yeah. So in other words, there's got to be some common electricity for the doors to be working too. So, no
Right.
water was ever in them, and I don't think I would plan on that either, so.
Brian, what do you see, I guess, on projects like this?
Yeah, absolutely. On a project like this, almost all of them is 1 meter for the entire building, and no heat is typical in T hangar bays. Electric is the only utility, and it's basically lighting. A convenience recept kind of on each wall, or we may have our normal design is a couple just 120 volt receps in the tail wing area, and then as Jim mentioned, it's probably a 30 or 40 amp 2-pole breaker to power the bifold door motor, and that's it. You're not, maybe some exterior lights, couple minor exterior lights that are LED. So normally what we see is the cost of that electric is, relatively minor. 1 meter for the whole building, and that's just rolled into the cost of the rent, but no water, sewer, or heat, gas type service for hangars of this nature, is what I would recommend and what we see in most other locations.
Thank you.
Anything further on this item? Okay. We're good to just kind of gather some more of that information and we can have it on the agenda to approve next meeting. Okay. Our next item is 8B, discussion and potential action regarding city manager purchasing authority. Briefly discuss this with the city attorney as we were getting ready to amend the agenda. With city manager Marsh's last day on Friday, typically any expenditure ranging from $2,500 to the $25,000 threshold that he has approval over, authority over, he is able to sign off on. Kelsey, do you know how many a day there are?
I don't know offhand how many a day, but we do have general operating costs that are over that threshold. Internet, electricity, those sorts of things.
Okay. I guess my thought process on it, and I think it would be fitting to have a motion and a second and an actual commission vote, but appointing interim finance director Breond and city clerk Moore to have the authority to approve those recurring costs that come up, to be able to sign those checks up to 25,000. Basically just combining those two in the meantime until we have an interim placed.
What about non-recurring costs?
Are there very many of those that fall within that range? I feel like, would they be?
Yeah.
I'll let Brad speak. He probably has the majority of those costs that might come through.
While you're coming to the podium there, would it be feasible, appropriate? I mean, if you sent out an email weekly and you got yays or nays from the commission, I mean, once you get 3, you're good to go. I mean, I don't think we need to make it too tedious, but if you say, hey, here's 20 transactions, can I get a thumbs up or a thumbs down? I think we can do that. I think I'll just tell you my frame of reference is the Junction City Commission actually approves everything in their meeting. I don't know if it's every week or every 2 weeks. They, as a commission, they approve all the transactions. I mean, I don't think it's terribly tedious for us to get an email and say yay or nay.
So my input on this is, yes, I probably have the department where I have the most expenses of large quantities. Obviously, we can't plan for equipment issues and problems, and sometimes those get obviously over my limit very easily. So that's a big issue when it comes to how you want to handle it. My main concern most of the time on my equipment is that I get it up and going as quickly as possible. So waiting on a time frame to get an approval is my biggest concern. One of the other, I guess you'd call it a normalcy, but a lot of my chemical purchases for the water treatment plant to keep everything active when I have to order them Those are always above my threshold limit. We obviously have some occasional engineering billing that comes through on projects. Those are usually over my limit. So it just kind of depends on what the situation is, but yeah, I'd like about the easiest way that we can handle this and move things all along in a scenario. I like the idea of these two. I think with the both of them in the know of what the situation would be. Obviously, I'm not going to spend anything that I wouldn't need at that point. Be signing off on myself personally. So
What, because we always have the transactions included at the end of our packet,
Mhm.
For every two meetings, so we can keep an eye on what's going on. For this particular scenario of not having a full city manager and then having the delegated authority for Shayla and Kelsey to sign off, what I'd be interested in is just included in our packet a report of any of those things that are just kind of highlighting which ones are in that typical city manager spending authority. So
right,
so that then every 2 weeks, it's not only available to us as a commission, but it's there and there. And then if any of us see any issues, we can bring that up with staff. We can bring it up during a meeting.
right.
And then address it at that point. But otherwise, to operate and business efficiency wise, to have
Yeah,
the
if I-
authority to spend,
and,
and then then we just see what's happening, highlighted in our packet afterwards.
And
So,
I'll just throw in another scenario I just thought of, which is almost every time it happens, if we have a water leak or something go wrong when we're purchasing valves and fittings and whatever we need to do, even if it's setters or meters or anything like that, that we typically have to order in regularly. That is right away over my limit at the snap of a finger. So especially on them unplanned, once again, emergencies, just getting the ball rolling. So.
Well, and realistically, it'll be a week or two.
Sure.
So I'm comfortable with that in the meantime.
Okay. Yep. No, I appreciate it.
I would make a motion to delegate the city manager's purchasing authority to a combination of, I guess, dual signatures between interim finance director Breond and city clerk Moore.
I'll second that.
Motion has been moved and seconded. Do we have any further commission discussion? My only thing is it would be good, like I said, next meeting, likely, hopefully we'll have, I shouldn't say likely, that's a little too premature. Hopefully we'll have an interim chosen. But it would be helpful to have that list, like Commissioner Witt mentioned, just so we have a reference of it. So I know it's a lot of those expenses are already included, but
Just to draw attention to them.
yep. Okay. Do you have any further commission discussion?
Like I said, I still think that if there's a $3,000 expense that needs to come up for a maintenance thing, we can send out an email and the commission can do that. I guess we're ultimately responsible for it, so I would like us to keep that responsibility.
Well, in the way it is now, we don't see any of those. Really, we're just sticking with what we're doing now.
Well, we have that vested in one person who is going to be no longer with us, right?
Right.
So, in the interim, I guess my suggestion is that we keep that to ourselves. We can send out an email. I can respond to an email from my phone and say yay or nay. My guess is it'll take about as long for these two to approve it as it would for us. So that's my feeling.
Do we have any further commission discussion on that item?
My thoughts on it is, making it as easy as possible with the reoccurring costs. Perhaps the non-reoccurring instances, we could work on what Commissioner Koloff had recommended. So my thought process is approve the reoccurring costs up to 25,000. And non-reoccurring costs, we can evaluate as needed if something comes up. Or would the simplest process be approve the reoccurring costs?
I guess I think you bring up a good point here. I don't have any concerns about water treatment plant chemicals. Brad, I think that certainly falls under the recurring costs. I will say, I'm just looking at the transactions here. There's a transaction to Evergy, for example, for $47,000. That's over $25,000. We've never approved that, and that's $40,000 over $40,000 every single month. So I'm saying that maybe there's another one here, and this was on my list to ask you about for 28,000 for Bonnell travel. I have no idea what that is. So I think that there's already been some stuff that has been either slipping through the cracks or pushed under the rug that we need to be paying more attention to. Again, I don't know how those $47,000 things get approved. When we don't approve them. I guess maybe you could make the argument that that's a combination of 40 or 50 $1,000 transactions for Evergy. I'm not sure.
Any other comments? I'm comfortable with it and for, a week or two.
My only concern, I understand the policy, and this is not a commentary on the policy. My only concern would be the vote by email and how we reconcile that with our COMA obligations and specifically the statutory prohibition on secret ballots. I'm not prepared to say that's implicated, but I think the way it was initially framed as voting in response to an email, we couldn't do that. Now, each individual commissioner could possibly respond directly to whoever sends out that email and indicate whether they object, and then you could address it in a public meeting. But we're not allowed to vote on city matters and expenditures by email.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Have any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll move to roll call vote. Commissioner Koloff,
Nay.
Vice Mayor Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Witt,
Yes.
myself, yes, motion carries. Next item under 10 reports, Brad Anderson, Public Works Director. It was mentioned that you had something to.
Sure. Brad Anderson, Public Works Director. Just a couple of updates for you. Most of you probably noticed, but the Third Street project was completed. They came in and completed that in 4 days. There was just a little bit of extra that they did, and the bill came in exactly what the quote was. So they just covered that for us on a couple of intersections where I seen some problems. I asked them to kind of figure in the square footage, and they told me on the job site, we'll just take care of it. I waited to see what they sent in, and they did. So we appreciate that. And I reached out to them, thanking them for that. Another little update that the wastewater treatment building repairs that you guys have heard about, that is being finished up by the engineers and going to our city engineer for approval. So we're getting more in depth in the project on that, just to keep you updated, because you'll be hearing more. Other than that, Public Works will be assisting Director Tim Brook and Parks and Rec with some 4th of July preparations next week. Getting ready for the pit, and the fire is going to be involved in that a little bit with filling it. And really not mine to say, but I'll speak for Director Tim Brook, as you didn't know that the basketball courts she has that project underway currently, and the resurfacing is taking place. I think they told her they were supposed to be done by the 4th weekend. Hopefully this week, she says. So
Okay. Yeah, I drove by, I think, last week and saw them working on it, so. Okay. All right. Our next item is a motion to recess.
Want a quick break or move right into it?
Let's go.
All right. I move we recess a regular meeting and move right into our study session.
I'll second that.
Motion has been moved and seconded. Do we have any further commission discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to roll call vote. Vice Mayor Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Witt,
Yes.
Commissioner Koloff.
Aye.
Myself, yes, motion carries. We are in recess. I will now call to order the June 23rd, 2025 City of Abilene, Kansas City Commission study session to order. Our first item is 2A, discussion regarding street closures for Oktoberfest. City Clerk Moore.
Mayor and Commissioners, we have received the application for the street closures for the Oktoberfest event in September downtown. We are waiting on the organizer to return the signatures of the property owners around the street closure area for approval. So that's just the holdup right now, and I anticipate the ordinance will be on the agenda at the next meeting for approval. They have to have this approval to send to the state to get their temporary alcohol permit.
Do we have any questions for City Clerk Moore on that?
Do you need the signatures for us to approve this?
For the street closures, yes, we have to have the property owner's signatures.
And that has to precede the application for the liquor license?
Yes.
So they're still waiting on those property owner signatures, not waiting on us.
Right.
Okay.
Hannah Negley, to my knowledge, is still going around getting signatures of the property owners to turn into us.
Okay, just didn't want the ball to be in our court, so. Okay, any further questions on that? Okay, seeing none, we will move into item 2B, discussion regarding net notice to exceed revenue neutral rate for 2026 budget. Interim Finance Director Breon, City Clerk Moore.
Mayor and Commissioners, this is the discussion of the resolution notifying the county clerk of intent to exceed revenue neutral for 2026. Senate Bill 13 requires taxing entities to hold a separate public hearing if they intend to exceed the revenue neutral rate for the next budget year. Revenue neutral rate is determined by the June 15th city valuation and 2025 mill levy. Part of that requirement is to notify their county clerk no later than July 20th with the date, time, location of the hearing, and the amount of the mill levy the city is proposing. We are currently looking for guidance from the commission on where you would like to be on that revenue neutral rate hearing. As a reminder, we can put whatever we put on that resolution is we cannot exceed that, but we can absolutely come in lower. So it has been the history to kind of go above what we hope to be and just prepare for that. Shayla and I have worked diligently to try to get it as low as possible with our current working budget and the revenues that we are going to see hopefully carry it over from 25. But we need some guidance on where you guys would like to see that R&R on the resolution. And again, hoping to come in lower than even that.
Right.
With still some uncertainties and where like insurance increase or potential increases and things like that. In my ideal world, we'd be R&R again, but again, with this notice of wanting to give us a little bit of space, my preference would be to put the current mill levy in this notification. So did some math on that, where how valuations have increased. That would, if that actually played out, that's about a 5.5% increase, I think, dollar for dollar, compared to what this current year's property tax revenues are. So again, my preference is hopefully we can get to R&R or below, but to give us that space in case costs as those actuals are coming in, because we still don't have an audit back yet, which I'm looking forward to receiving that when we get it. So yeah, with our current mill levy of 45.648, that'd be my preference.
Yeah, I'd echo the same thoughts still. I mean, we'll work to be R&R again. But I'm fine putting that on the notice at 45.648. That just sets a threshold. And I know historically we've actually set it much higher and then still came in under the revenue neutral rate. But yeah, I think we can, personally, I'm fine with that. And then we can work to find some areas to cut down and still remain revenue neutral. And that's what we've historically done. And I kind of give the same spiel every year too. We don't, I mean, the numbers we get on June 15th are estimates. So we don't have the hard valuation yet. So it could change. So it gives us a little leeway in that if it does happen to change. So.
I know you guys haven't seen any budget review yet. We're going to start that hopefully by the next meeting. But I will tell you that we have not made any major increases except for general operating costs. And I would say it would be hard to get to that 45 at this moment. Obviously, we'll look for some guidance from you guys on where to reduce. But we did have, an increase in insurance. Some salary numbers were different than originally projected for 25. So that's going to be a challenge to get to even the 45.
Yeah, that's another good thing to highlight. One of the major changes we did last year in our budget was budgeting personnel based on predicted actuals instead of full employment, where that was the first time since I've been on the city commission that we've budgeted that way. We've always typically budgeted on full employment, and usually there's unfilled positions. But yeah, from talking with staff, we actually were fully employed. So in the past 6 months or so. So yeah, so those numbers actually coming in higher than what we budgeted last year. So that was something that we acknowledged in the budgeting season, that was a risk, or that was something we were doing with our eyes wide open in order to get below that R&R rate. So yeah, thanks for reminding us of that.
I guess my preference is that we go below the revenue neutral rate. And I think one way to hold our feet to the fire is by not passing a resolution to exceed the revenue neutral rate. And as I have done, I think every year in the past, I will vote against this.
Yep, and it's always that qualifier for me too. I support this, and we've come in below the revenue neutral rate. But even when we pass our budget, we don't have those hard valuation numbers yet. So even when we are passing our final budget, there's still that risk that they could change.
And like Kelsey said, seeing the numbers that we've been looking at so far, the personnel, we have been fully staffed for a good majority of 2025. We have done some figures to try to get projections for the end of the year with the open positions that we have now to try to bring that carryover down or over to bring the mill levy down. I know prices are going up everywhere. We can't stay neutral if we're going to continue to provide the services that we provide. That's just I don't want my taxes to go up either, but that's the reality we're living in right now.
I will speak to this a little bit more. I am, and I will continue to do that between now and the next meeting, which we get an extra week because there's a fifth Monday, but I'm going line by line and trying to project every general fund item out to get us the most accurate carryover amount. But we have stayed revenue neutral for, I believe, based on the information I have, the last 3 fiscal years. And we are seeing that compression happen now where we have not increased costs in just general operating, lights, telephone, internet, energy, gas, all of that, that are just steadily increasing. And the cost to buy the big machinery that we need, that sorts of things. So.
Yeah, so I'll say from my point, given this, just my perspective on the 45.648, if over the next few weeks before we get to our next meeting, if as you guys are working those numbers and then you have some sort of reason of why that needs to be larger, just again setting our goal line out, because again we can always reduce it. Just what I would ask for is what that explanation is. So whether that's multiple different line items of personnel or energy costs or what have you. If staff is going to come to us with a recommendation that's higher than that 45.648, then I want to know a reason why. or reasons why.
And just an FYI for the numbers that we're working for right now for the staff increase COLA, we're looking at 3% for all hourly employees and 1.5% for salary is what we have in the numbers right now.
Do you have allocations for the expected bond debt service?
Not right in front of me, I don't, but I could definitely get it for you before the next meeting.
I don't necessarily need that. I'm just wondering if you're considering that in your calculations for next year.
It is absolutely on my list.
Okay. And then do you have an allocation for expected revenue from the RHID?
It is in there, but I don't believe we had that last year. So it's line item there, but I don't have a definitive number or even a real estimate at this moment.
Okay.
There's a few things that I'm hoping to sit down with City Manager Marsh before the end of the week, and those are topics that were on that list. So
Okay, I will tell you, I've done some preliminary on that. You may need to meet with Leah at the county to get that information.
Okay. Anything further on that? Seeing none, I'd consider a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been moved and seconded. Do we have any further commission discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to roll call vote. Commissioner Witt,
Yes.
Commissioner Kolhoff,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Miller,
Yes.
myself, yes, motion carries. We are adjourned.